Before we go back to domestic politics, let's talk about Alexei Navalny, because this is a shocking story. This is about the murder, allegedly, of Alexei Navalny. Vladimir Putin must be made to pay for the murder of Alexei Navalny, according to world leaders. Now, if you've just woken up, Alexei Navalny, who is a very long-standing, or was a very long-standing opponent of Putin, who appeared healthy just a few days ago, 47-year-old chap, he fell ill on a walk at the Arctic penal colony where he was being held, according to the Kremlin. Apparently, he lost consciousness and he died soon afterwards. Now, the Kremlin has promised to investigate the death thoroughly. That's been condemned by governments across the world. The UK government summoned the Russian embassy to make clear it holds the Russian authorities fully responsible. Also, Joe Biden says that the Russian president was responsible for his death. David Cameron, the foreign secretary, said Putin's Russia fabricated charges against him. They poisoned him. They sent him to an Arctic penal colony, and he has now tragically died. Putin, according to Cameron, should be accountable for what has happened. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, also has condemned what has happened. She said he had been slowly murdered by President Putin and his regime. I don't know about you two, Sam, but these are now high stakes. But Putin testing the West, I believe, the resolve of the West.
Yeah, but that's Putin's game, right? This is what you hear world leaders saying Putin must pay, right? Is he going to? Really? Is that realistic? How is he going to pay? The in Congress in America, they're blocking aid to the Ukraine. The EU and NATO is absolutely terrified about what's going to happen after November. And all the West is doing is exactly what the West has done with Putin for the past 10-20 years, which is talk big and allow him to get away with it. He should have been stopped in Syria. He should have been stopped in Crimea.
And those were the points that David Cameron himself made to the Americans, isn't it? Just let us, just in terms of that, and we were talking about this earlier, what are the sanctions to Russia? Because actually we've pretty much pulled every lever we can, and we are doing that thing, aren't we, where we sit back, talk tough, great rhetoric, do nothing.
Yeah, the reality is there isn't that much we can do. We've already thrown the book at him in terms of sanctions since the start of the Ukraine war. More sanctions aren't necessarily going to have much of an impact. But sort of going back to what you said, Sam, this is what he does. This is not uncommon. People get thrown out of windows in Russia when they oppose him. People go missing randomly in Russia when they oppose him. The only thing I think in this scenario we can now hope will happen is that perhaps it might change the mind of the US and maybe some more of this aid to Ukraine.
Well, I just wonder what it also does in terms of the response in Russia itself, because I do think the Russian people are waking up to what's going on. Of course, they are allowing people to show tributes to him, and that is a part.
Allowing, you say. I think that is showing immense bravery amongst these people going out, making these sort of shrines to them. They will no doubt be put on a list. They'll be tracked when they go home. Whoever it is who watches them.
Can I read you someone's message here, which I think is quite interesting? Jackie says, the hypocrisy over the tragic death of Navalny is puzzling. Journalist Gonzalo Lira in Ukraine, arrested and tortured to death, nothing happened. Julian Assange, journalist, never charged with a crime, held in our most top security prison with declining health, nothing. As a lawyer, do you see that as a comparison? A barrister, apologies.
No, not lawyer's
well, he's
fine.
still a lawyer, allegedly.
I'm not across the Ukrainian case. The Assange case, Assange was accused of crimes initially in Sweden, I believe, and refused to go and face up to those, and hid in the embassy for, about 7 years? 7 years, yeah. And so I think that was substantively different. That wasn't a ad hoc, trumped-up political tribunal like Putin prosecuted Navalny with. That was a proper public prosecutor in Sweden. Now Assange is being held because he is, again, accused of crimes in the US, and they're talking about extraditing him to the US. Should those be crimes? I think that's a whole other debate. I find WikiLeaks a little bit. I kind of come down on either side on that, because I think some of what WikiLeaks has done is quite irresponsible and put people in danger. I think some of what WikiLeaks has done is absolutely brilliant and put out stuff that governments were hiding and we have a right to know about. So I don't think Assange is the same as Navalny.
Let's just go back to Navalny, because amazingly he predicted his own death back in 2022 in a documentary he made. He basically predicted the Moscow regime would kill him because it felt deeply threatened by him. His message to the world at that time in 2022 was, when I am killed, it is very simple, do not give up. Now, when Putin was informed, allegedly, of the death of Navalny, he was shown cheerfully meeting workers at a factory in Russia in the Ural Mountains. I mean, clearly, this is Putin in charge. And I just wonder where we are in terms of that. So there is this solidarity. When you look at the EU, it's agreed 50 billion euros as a financial package to Ukraine. We also know the UK has spent 2.5 billion in support. We've got this bilateral defence deal. We're still waiting for the United States. David Cameron wading in here and telling the United States... And he said, I'm going to drop all diplomatic ties. Basically, you need to get a move on. You need to put the $95 billion into Ukraine. Not gone down very well in the United States in certain quarters.
No, it hasn't gone down very well. And there has been now this ongoing dispute between him and one of the Republican senates about his letter in which he said...
This is Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Exactly, in which he... and I read the letter, actually, and at first I thought perhaps it has gone wrong, because when you bring up Hitler and you bring up World War II, it is a very sensitive topic and people don't like it that much.
So she misinterpreted what he said?
Massively misinterpreted. What he said was nowhere near comparing the US to Hitler in any way whatsoever. And I think in a lot of ways that
it was about the approach to Hitler.
It was about the approach to Hitler, and I think that it shows a lot of what the sort of Trump-era Republican politician is in these scenarios, where they sort of act and speak first before they think, and then they double down on it.
I mean, yes, isn't so in terms of this bill, this has started in the Senate, right, and is now in the House of Representatives. Now, Cameron essentially, and I think he's right to say, and this goes back to your point, doesn't it? We've been complicit. We allowed him to get away with this in 2008 in Georgia, and then again with the Crimean, and everyone sort of didn't do anything, sort of tutted. And he's now saying to the US, you need to get this through and pass this bill. There is also something, I suppose, from the American psyche. They don't like being told what to do by other countries, particularly Britain. And she's right. Marjorie Taylor Greene said to Cameron, surely you've got better things that you should worry about in your own country. It's falling apart, pretty much.
Well, I mean... Look at Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. I think you'd talk about falling apart. But this is you're right. It goes to the heart of what we've been getting wrong in the West and our approach to foreign policy in general, which is that it's been much more about domestic political wins than it has been about long-term foreign policy goals making the world a safer place. In the US, the Republicans are blocking aids to the Ukraine, and just to give you a sense of the stakes here, Ukraine had to withdraw from positions this week because they literally had 2 shells left and didn't have detonators for those shells. So that's how dire the situation for the Ukraine army is. That's how much they need this aid. And Republicans are blocking it because they don't want to put through a bill that gives more money to deal with the border, their southern border, and these two things were linked together in a security bill. They don't want to do that because they want to give Trump that issue in the election. So they're playing domestic politics with global security.
But Sam, I think the people listening to us right now are going to listen to what you've just said, and they're going to say, no, we don't want more global policy. We want our situation at home where we can't afford our mortgages or our table, food on our table. That's what we want sorted out. And I know you're going to say, but if we don't sort the world out, then everything here gets worse. But I think people now are looking internally and they want their problems sorted out here.
But both of those situations can be, it's not exclusive, you can't just do one and then the other. We do have to sort out what's going on in the world. We cannot be naive enough to expect that once, say, Russia gets Ukraine, he will stop there. History tells us that is not the case.
Well, he's already got his eyes on Moldova and other
he's
countries.
Power-hungry. And the idea that what is going on in Ukraine does not impact us is just farcical. It is so important.
And at the same time, we now know Ukrainian troops have been withdrawn from Avdiivka, which is a key eastern town which has been besieged by Russian troops for months. So the Ukraine is desperate for this. I wonder how this resolves in the States. And of course, Trump is a key player. We'll talk to Caroline Faraday at 9 o'clock about the latest in there. And it remains to be seen what happens next. But I quite enjoyed someone telling David Cameron to kiss her bottom.